So this is Tom's first business summit. And in fact, Tom started with the University of Redlands 3 days ago now?
Yeah, 4. I'm a veteran.
Yeah, veteran. You know, we have a bit of a tradition of throwing people in at the deep end, and we've invited Tom to be our first speaker. So over to you, Tom.
Great, thank you. It may be my first business summit, but I'm delighted to have been coming to S3's user conference for a decade now, and working on GIS in the academic setting, and appreciate the opportunity to give my perspective on this notion of digital spatial transformation, or what I've dubbed the business of where, kind of playing off the science of where. Now, transformation is an abstract concept. So how can we ground it? And so I thought I would lead with a couple of these examples. You may recognize some of these, starting with the modem over here. Remember that? Probably it was before a lot of your time. That's what I had when I went to graduate school. And the sound of the modem, right? It was vintage. And now, of course, Netgear's 3 gigabits per second, right? Router, which has transformed homes and business routers, transformed doing business from anywhere. Another example is on the mobile side. That's a Razor, right? Did any of you have a Razor? Any of you, right? Weren't they great? You could make a phone call and type, barely, right? We had to do the 3 letters per, right? And now, there's the phone I have now. It's everything. It's a phone, it's a radio, it's a music player, it's a camera, it's make airline reservations, right? Look up the restaurants. Really has transformed how we do business and how we live our lives. These are just 2 specific examples, concrete on how things have changed. This is another one that I like to point out if we want to do this compare and contrast. The yellow on your left is You've Got Mail, AOL. Anybody remember AOL? Or as Time Warner, AOL, which is no longer, right? And so it peaked at, what, 25 million subscribers. Look at that intermediate ski slope going down there as broadband came on board, new opportunities came on board. And to the right, no surprise, Netflix and the growth of Netflix, right? And Netflix is a broadband play when they got rid of being the DVD business and into streaming. Netflix is a broadband and IP and algorithm play. I took a class up to Netflix. I know some people there, and they said their investments in algorithms is fundamental because when you go to Netflix, how many here are Netflix, right? A lot, right? Look at that. Yeah, and how many watched ABC, right? No. But when you go onto Netflix, that better be customized for you. And if it's not, you're not going to watch. And so the algorithms that do that is a critical part of their investments. Now that really leads me to analytics and the role of analytics in the transformation. Because really under the hood of the digital revolution is this drive towards analytics. In this world of big data, if you can have any kind of information you want, it's what do you do with it and what insight do you get from it? Now, Thomas Davenport wrote a book about a decade ago on competing with analytics. And Harvard Business Review asked him to look back over 10 years. And what he essentially said was, companies now recognize the value of analytics, and they use it. However, as it's become more widespread, one can't rest on its laurels, but have to continually upgrade and invest in order to remain competitive. And I think we'll hear later from Sean Fitzgerald about a maturity notion of that, on how one can grow over time in order to get deeper and deeper insights. In this regard, it's no surprise that companies like Salesforce have grown so tremendously, right? I mean, probably 15 years ago, there were 4 people. Now it's a $15 billion company. Why? Because the continuing desire for companies to have insights about their customers. I mean, we've gone from a world where you bought something and you said goodbye to the store until you came back to a world where there's constant communication going on between the business and the customer. So this is an example of consumer, right, analytics that have become just so critical to the success of business. And the question then becomes, well, what about spatial analytics? How does this play within the suite of analytical choices that businesses have? For some of us who've been researching this for a while, we know that there's documentation that suggests it can have an important role. One researcher has suggested that up to 80% of business data can be georeferenced. So there is a location tag on much business data. The question becomes, when is that location tag valuable? A location tag about a customer, a location tag about a location of a business, and so on and so forth. Now, we've seen through research and case studies documented gains on both the revenue side of using spatial analytics, such as growing customer base, new locations, so on and so forth, as well as operational gains, such as savings from consolidation of locations, trimming down the supply chain, and so on. Esri has recently put up a series of areas and case studies, and we are in academia contributing to this knowledge by looking at areas such as consumer, retail, healthcare, commercial real estate, media, many of the businesses that you are in, and other businesses, to try and understand and document what kind of impact can spatial analytics have. What's the ROI? Having done that, though, and then this bottom point, I guess, is the most important one for me on the slide, is yet as an industry, I think we're just beginning to understand spatial analytics workflows and how to tie those to business objectives. It's pretty common in business school and in business to do a strategic plan, or even do a customer relationship management analysis and plan. But doing a spatial analytic exercise on how does it connect to the objectives, how do we implement it, what data do we need, who should see that data, what decisions should be made, I think that that's still evolving as a standard operating procedure. What I wanted to do was give at least one example of how this plays out. I recently visited Li and Fong in Hong Kong and in Shanghai. They're a very large supply chain manager. By supply chain manager, they manage everything. Company says, and it's many of the stores that you know here and around the world, we want this. They design it, they source it, they get it produced, they ship it, they send it off. They note that the average for that process is about 40 weeks, right? And they bring up the case when Coca-Cola came to them and said, we'd really, in the summer of 2013, we'd really like to have really small trees that could be used to put little Coke caps on for Christmas, right around the Christmas time. This is Latin America wanted this. And Li and Fong said, great idea. And they said, fine, you do it, but you only have 10 weeks to design it, manufacture it, ship it, and of course it had to arrive by Christmas, right? One day late is not good. And so they took it on, and they delivered it within 10 weeks. 7 containers to South America. Since then, and this is from the annual report, this has become the new normal for them because supply chains are getting squeezed. E-commerce, consumer demand is driving that you can't take a long time to produce something to show up on the shelf because somebody else is going to take a shorter time and then you're going to be out of date. So their new normal is going to be 21 weeks for this process. So that's a business objective. Now, how do you tie what we're talking about, transformation, to this? Well, they have to transform the supply chain process. They have to do rapid prototyping, virtual prototyping, sourcing, location-based sourcing that will produce it in the most reliable and high-quality way. Track with vigilance the manufacturing, shipping, arrival of it in order to squeeze down that supply chain. And within this, spatial data is critically important, particularly on the kind of the tail end, once its manufacturing starts, where it goes, how it gets delivered, and so forth. So this is an example of how digital transformation is a part of a business transformation and critical to the success of companies such as Li and Fong. Now, thinking about how do we train people to do this? Being an educator, that's kind of what we do. We think about not only what needs to be done, but how do you train people to be transformers? Returning to that Thomas Davenport article, he notes that it's not just technology, but it's what, quote unquote, non-technical key things, key business things such as leadership, culture, strategy. How do you integrate use of this data into a business strategy, manage it to be successful? So as an academic institution, what we've tried to do is link the academic kind of competencies with the workplace competencies. So you see Tier 2 are various kind of academic things to learn. Tier 3 is what happens in the workplace, right? And how do you connect those things? How do you create educational opportunities and training opportunities to not only know about GIS, but how to plan with it, manage it, implement it, evaluate it, so on and so forth. So what we've done at the University of Redlands, and several other universities have done as well, is integrate it into business education so that it's not, you learn GIS over here, learn business over here, but you learn about business and really focus on what can happen in the use of GIS. So we have an emphasis that is on GIS, and the MBA graduates, of which there have been thousands by now, can focus their MBA on areas of GIS, including the management of GIS, including marketing, policy, sourcing, international supply chains, and how to do effective strategic planning. We've been very pleased with the results of this, and it was one of the reasons I was excited to join Redlands, is that the graduates have gone on to have careers not only in GIS, but also in management and in various related fields. My bottom point here, which I think I've started to allude to, is there remains an important opportunities to train in the context of business settings, not in the classroom, but in business settings to understand how to use GIS, how to manage GIS, how to train executives, companies to maximize the value of GIS within the business. So, to conclude, here are my main points. First, digital transformation is fundamentally affecting business processes throughout the economy. Second, analytics plays a key part in powering this transformation, and it's really because it delivers insight from all the data that can help businesses make decisions in a variety of ways. Third, within this analytics suite, spatial analytics has a role. It's emerging as a value component. We know it's valuable when location is a key part of a business. The open question is what happens when location is one aspect of the business, but not the key part? And I think that's the gray area that we're trying to figure out. Fourth, and finally, training the spatial transformer, and I like this term, we are all spatial transformers. Training spatial transformers includes management as well as technical components that can be conducted in traditional as well as in new ways of learning, such as immersive training. With that, thank you for having me here this morning, and I look forward to a great day.
Tom, stay.
Maybe some water.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Tom. So I think we just coined a new term, spatial transformers. Can we like hashtag it or? So
We are all now spatial transformers. That's right.
So what do you mean in that sort of notion of being spatial transformers? You said that we've got essential spatial data. 80% of all business data has spatial, but then you mentioned sort of in passing about there's other data that has spatial dimensions.
That's right. Well, the analogy I would use is what's happened in the customer relation management space, right? And you've seen the disruptive evolution of continuous relationship between the customer and the business. And there are people in the companies that are, if you will, customer transformers, right? So if we take that idea and we say, who's the change agent? Who are the ones in the organization that can make an analysis from an ad hoc analysis into a standard business process when making a decision? It includes not only those who have technical expertise in GIS, but managers whose divisions or departments are customers for that data, and getting them to be educated customers so that if an analysis is done, they say, well, how does this play out locationally, right? What insight do we get? And ask those questions, and that will create really a demand for it within the organization. And I think that's part of the training too, is how to elevate the thought so that it's a natural question, like, well, how does this play out locationally? How does this play out spatially? What have we learned? What have we learned from this initiative? And incorporate that as a standard conversation within setting business objectives and evaluating them.
And I think that's an amazing sort of opportunity. And one of the things that we've been working on in the commercial team horizontally is actually to bring an executive forum as part of the Business Summit and do more. So I hope through partnership with you and all of you in the audience that we can continue to sort of drive towards that over the next year. So,
sounds like a plan. All right,
okay,
thank you.
Thank you.